And now we're going to talk about piecing and quilting with the Brother machines. So with the Brother machine, you will get the 1/4-inch foot. This is a free motion foot, and this is our walking foot. And I'm going to explain how to use the 3 different feet. But first we're going to talk about piecing, because you have to make your top first. And that's what this is used. So this is our 1/4-inch foot. This is the 1/4-inch right along the edge here. This edge here is what we call the scant 1/4-inch. So people who are doing paper piecing, I would say intermediate to advanced quilters, tend to always want a scant 1/4-inch so that their blocks always line up. So I'm going to demonstrate how to use this foot. I'm going to change my stitch settings. So the easiest thing to do is to press number 1 again. Wipes out anything I did. And I'm going to go to my center stitch, because you can see right here, my needle is left justified. You don't want to start stitching there because you'll snap your needle off, and go to stitch number 3. And it puts it right in the middle of here. So I have some strips here that are 2.5 inches in width, which is a standard width of a quilt strip. So some of the tips about piecing is our default on our machine. So the length is always 2.5. That's your default. I recommend you make that a little smaller. If you've ever put a top together and you find at the edges your blocks are starting to come apart, it's because your stitch length's a little too long. I tend to make my stitch length 1.8. So I actually have this saved as a setting on my machine. So whenever I'm piecing a top, I always have it at 1.8. Then you'll find that your blocks will not come apart. Put this underneath. Now, you never reinforce your seam when you start for piecing, because you're going to end up crossing it with another seam. So wherever you cross a seam, you don't need to reinforce it, unlike garment sewing. So now I'm going to sew my 1/4-inch seam. I'm going to keep it right on the edge of this foot. Get to the end, cut my fabric. Yeah. And I'm actually using a gray thread here. I piece always with gray thread. I don't match the color of the fabric when I'm piecing. When you're quilting, it's a different story. Gray, 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 it blends with every color. So that's my 1/4-inch. So I've been quilting probably close to 30 years now, and this is what I always use. But I find that as I get older, I have more problems keeping my fabric straight. And then they came out with this foot. This foot has a blade on it. Show you the difference. So here, with this foot, I have to keep my fabric along here. With this foot, the fabric stays right along the blade here. This has changed my life. I highly recommend this foot for all Brother owners. So I'm right up against that blade, you can see. Now I don't have to worry about going over. A lot of people will complain that my seams are crooked, they're not straight. And I had just found that as I get older, I don't know if I get distracted by the dog or my husband talking to me, but this just keeps it straight. And my blocks are now the accurate size. Nice and straight seam. This blade is worth every penny, and I think they're only like $32. It is amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. With this machine, this foot comes standard, but you can actually purchase the 1/4 inch piecing foot with the guide. So one of the other tips that I always like to tell my students is that when I'm piecing, I always like to use a pre-filled bobbin. That's an 80 weight down there. And on my top, I'm actually using an 80 weight thread up here. These are Wonderfill products, which is a great Canadian company headquartered in Calgary. The thinner the thread, the better my seam allowances are. If you're using a thick thread, you would never use a 40 weight to piece with because you'll end up losing fabric, or your blocks will be too small if your thread is too thick. I like a thin thread, and I press my seams open. Some people say you always press them to one side. Some people steam them. Some people don't. Some people use starch. You decide what works best for you. There is no quilt police. There's only suggestions. And if somebody says you must do it this way, do it the other way and see how it works for you.